the foray into the dark fantasy, a bunch of production delays, and the first PG rating of any Disney animated film. What makes the Black Cauldron special? And what were its struggles as a film? Hello, my name is Am, and I am currently on a journey with my husband where we are watching every single Disney animated film in chronological release order and ranking them on a tier list. But how my videos work is I like to give a little bit of history and historical context that makes these films before we get into our thoughts and our tier list ranking. The Black Cauldron was released on July 24th, 1985. It is loosely based on the first two books in the Chronicles of Prydain series by Lloyd Alexander. It stars Grant Bardsley as Taran, Susan Sheridan as Princess Elenwee, Freddie Jones as Dalbin, Nigel Hawthorne as Fluter Flom, Arthur Mollett, who had played Mr. Dawes Jr. in Mary Poppins and had voiced Mr. Ages in Secret of Nim. In this movie, he voices King Idaleg. John Byner as Gurgi, Phil Fondacaro as Creeper, Ida Reese Marin as Ordu, Adele Malice Mori as Orwin, and Billy Hayes as Orgok. Those are the three witches. For anybody who doesn't remember what the witches' names are, those are the three witches. John Hurt as the Horned King, and John Huston as the narrator. According to Joe Hale, a producer on the film, the wife of the production manager Don Duckwall, Lenore Duckwall, originally read the Chronicles of Prydain books and suggested that Disney adapt the film. At this time, Disney was not appealing to the quote-unquote cool 80s teen audience. And at this time, I don't think, I'm a younger person, so elder millennials and Gen X will talk about the movies at that time. The movie theater was a very magical experience. A lot of innovation happened during that time. Movie culture at the time was very big for teens. All I have to say for my generation is rest in peace to third places for teenagers. So Disney wanted to make a PG-rated film in order to appeal to the teenage demographic. Keep in mind, this is Disney, and their last movie they released was The Fox and the Hound, which is a little bit more mature, but the one before that was The Rescuers, which also is kind of a little bit darker, but I don't feel like it's no less. I feel like both of them are still child-friendly. In this moment, they're deliberately saying, we want to make this one not really child-friendly. Let me tell you, the amount of people I've seen on the internet and word of mouth say, yeah, this movie kind of traumatized me as a child. It's a lot. It's a lot. I would definitely have been scared of this movie as a child. 100 million %. It would have scared me. The studio acquired the rights to the book in 1973, leading to pre-production on the project being started. According to Ollie Johnston, famous Disney 9 old man, and he had retired during the production of The Fox and the Hound. So he did not actively work on this movie, but he was still at the studio when they were talking about this movie and starting to develop. So according to Ollie Johnston, he, as well as Frank Thomas, one of the 9 old men, also retired during the production of Fox and the Hound, supported the project, saying that if it had been done well, it could have been as good as Snow White. And I kind of agree. It could have been really, really well. And, here's the thing. Snow White kind of has the dark fantasy aesthetic at times. I feel like they could have done it where it would have been a lot more like Sleeping Beauty and like Snow White. But I just think the way that they did it, it just didn't work. And due to the several storylines and over 30 characters in the book series, several story artists and animators worked on the development and adaptation of the books throughout the 70s. When The Rescuers was completed, it was tentatively planned that The Black Cauldron would be released in 1980. Veteran Disney artist Mel Shaw would create concept art, which president at the time Ron Miller deemed to be too difficult for the new animators. Due to this, by August of 1978, production had been pushed back, with the release instead planned for Christmas of 1984 due to the new animators struggling with animating realistic human characters. This is kind of the thing that they did with Snow White, too. But, like, keep in mind, a lot of these animators were new, and this was after a lot of the veterans had retired. So Black Cauldron and Fox and the Hound, even I'd say Black Cauldron more than Fox and the Hound, is so much more of these newer animators being trained. The original 1980 release date would then be planned for the Fox and the Hound. I'm guessing due to the animation work being easier to the newer animators. I'm also guessing, I think probably they were a little bit further in production with that one as well. Fox and the Hound would ultimately be delayed to be released in summer of 1981 due to Don Bluth and several other animators leaving to create his own animation studio. If you want to know more about that, you can check my 2 most recent videos. I have one on the Fox and the Hound, and I have one on The Secret of Nim. I discussed that in both of them. During all of this development craziness, storyboard artist Vance Gary made storyboards and adapted the Horned King to be a large Viking who had a red beard, fiery temper, and wore that classic 2-horned Viking helmet. Like, when we think of Vikings, just think of the helmet, you know. That's what he had. Ron Miller, who hired Rosemary Ann Sisson as an experienced British writer, was wanted in order to bring these stories to life. I mean, it only makes sense as the books were based on Welsh mythology. So it would make sense that you'd want somebody who kind of, you know, might know a little bit more about that. John Musker was planned to be the original director, originally expanding sequences in the first act of the film, but his work was deemed too comedic. In his own words, quote, "The older people I was working with didn't like any of my ideas." And he was in his mid to late 20s at the time, so I get it. And as someone in their 20s, I completely acknowledge how it feels to not have your ideas heard and acknowledged. So production for The Black Cauldron officially began in 1980. Joe Hale, the producer, along with animation directors Richard Rich and Ted Berman, began to toss out character designs like Tim Burton's, wanting a Sleeping Beauty style for the film. So Tim Burton actually did work on this film for a little bit and did work at Disney for quite a bit. Just a little bit. But I don't know, like, he didn't have the greatest time at Disney, but as you can tell, like, he didn't mesh with Disney's art style, which is weird because they totally could have had the chance to do like a weird Tim Burton-esque character design thing with Black Cauldron. You know, they wanted to go classical fantasy style, you know, but a little bit darker, and I get that. But they could have really, like, I would love to see a version of the Black Cauldron with kind of like weird, ugly creatures. Is that weird to say? Not like have the characters be weird and ugly creatures, but like the main characters that are humans. But like, I'd love to see like the witches. Like, he has very interesting designs for the witches, and I thought they were kind of cool. Anyway, they even went as far as bringing Milt Kahl out of retirement to create the character designs for Elenwy, Taran, Fluter Flam, as well as some other characters. So he actually created designs for all of the characters. In fact, like, I don't know. When I tried to link something earlier, it said that I couldn't put external links in the description, so links that aren't anything on YouTube. So I'll try to do it, and if I can't, I'm so sorry. But there's a website where all of his concept art sketches were posted, and you can see the influence because, like, according to it, Milt Kahl's like, I kind of don't really do the reference sketches, the character designs themselves. I don't really design those. I create and finalized the designs. I didn't really create these designs off the top of my head. I more finalized them. And so you can kind of see a lot of influences in other characters within them. It was at the point of like having Milt Kahl brought in and have him designing the characters, that the story was heavily changed, choosing to adapt to the stories of the first 2 books in the series. So it was around this time when that happened. I couldn't get an exact time when that was decided, but it was. This was also when Rosemary Ann Sisson would leave. I've pronounced her last name differently twice, but it's okay. Leave the project due to creative differences. Like, there was just arguments between her and whatever, and that's sad. Guys, something that I especially am realizing with Disney right now is we have had basically 2 movies, so this and Fox and the Hound, where there's just been so many arguments about the story itself. And I'm like, guys, I would say Disney's not about arguments. Yes, there have been arguments a lot about some story elements in the past, for sure. But it's really feeling to me like it's really becoming points of contention rather than disagreements. Does that make sense? Especially because it feels like as Disney as a company has grown, like, of course the CEO's in here, involved and stuff, but I don't feel like they have the same involvement that Walt did. You know what I mean? All this to say, I might just miss Walt. I might just miss the way things are. I might be getting nostalgic for a time I never lived. Crazy, right? That when you do research about stuff, you get nostalgic for a time you never lived. Anyway, continuing on. Due to creative differences, John Musker and Ron Clements were put on The Great Mouse Detective instead. Again, I say, John Musker and Ron Clements, big boys in the Disney Renaissance. And we'll talk about them in The Great Mouse Detective, okay? Joe Hale did not like Vance Geary's design for the Horned King, instead changing the design to be the one we see in the movie. The character then became an amalgamation of several villains from the books. So the only designs that were not tweaked from Milt Kahl's designs were Taryn and Ellen Wee. They were not tweaked that much, and they kind of wanted an Aurora-like design for Ellen Wee, which I get, but I'm also like, I see them as 2 very different ages. Hayley Mills was originally considered for the voice of Ellen Wee. Hayley Mills was like a Disney starlet in her day. So there's a pretty good chance that if you watched a Disney film at like live action, so that she didn't really do any animated work, but live action, that Hayley Mills would be in there. Original Parent Trap, Pollyanna. There's another one that I can't remember. The Castaways? Is that what it's called? The one with Hayley Mills? Anyway, she did quite a bit with Disney at that time. Before the initially planned 1984 release, a test screening for the rough cut of the film was held at a private studio theater. The Cauldron-born sequence particularly proved to be too intense and scared the little children. Newly appointed Disney chairman, we got a new person now. And let me tell you, I'll get into my thoughts and my feelings. Just know my opinions are, I don't know how popular my opinion is, but I also have some opinions about it. And here's the thing, I can separate what this person has done and the good things they have created in art. I don't think he's a very good person. So Jeffrey Katzenberg, because of the screening, ordered that certain scenes would need to be cut. Some due to the length of the film, others due to the intense themes and ability to scare children. Due to the fact that animated films are usually edited in the storyboard form using Leica reels, which are not usually the actual finished scenes, Joe Hale refused. And I can understand, like, I think Joe Hale, based on this stuff, and I understand this is just research, purely research, and people will just talk about stuff, just say things, To me, Joe Hale seemed a little bit difficult in some parts of this production. But also, I don't appreciate Jeffrey Katzenberg's actions in this moment. And I think I don't like Jeffrey Katzenberg as a human being. I don't think I like him as a human being, and that's that. But Jeffrey Katzenberg then retaliated by bringing the film to the editing bay himself without any approval from anyone. He's like, I'm going to do it myself. It's a little bit petty, and I think that's very inconsiderate. And I don't appreciate, I feel like the attitude is unnecessary, if that makes sense. The action is unnecessary, the attitude is unnecessary. And Joe Hale then told the new CEO at the company, Michael Eisner. If you don't know Michael Eisner, yeah, also another bucket of worms as a person. We will continue with these two people. Michael Eisner, and he had to call the editing bay, while Jeffrey Katzenberg was there, and ask him to stop, and convince him to stop trying to edit this thing. And this somehow worked. I don't know how, but Jeffrey Katzenberg did ask that the film be changed, which then delayed the planned scheduling of Christmas of 1984 to a release of July of 1985 in order to have the time for the film to be reworked. There were 12 minutes of the film cut, with certain scenes having to be rewritten and reanimated for continuity's sake. Some of these scenes involved more character interaction than we see, while others were cut due to violent content, including extended sequences involving the undead army. While most of these edits are seamless, the Cauldron-born sequence often involves clear edits. There's a clear edit of the music, and this is indicative of significant, jumps in the soundtrack. Which is weird because apparently there's a trailer that has part of it not edited. So part of the scene, in the unedited version, and the song is not, the soundtrack does not cut. I don't know. It's crazy. And the scene that was cut from this sequence is the Cauldron-born mauling the henchmen, with one kind of melting Indiana Jones 1 style. Reasonable, because traumatizing to children. I think you can find it on YouTube if you search Black Cauldron deleted scene. I think based on production cell stills that people have found at auction, they have been able to piece this scene back together. It's kind of crazy with the Black Cauldron, because looking for footage for this, I've stumbled upon people who really are finding lost media from this, and are being here's where the scenes are cut because of blah 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 blah, you can see here. And a technique invented by David W. Spencer at the Disney Studio Animation Photo Transfer Process, or known as APT, was first used for the Black Cauldron. This was tested in The Fox and the Hound in some scenes. The process works by photographing the rough animation onto high-contrast lithographic film, and then the negative of that photo would then be copied onto the cell sheets, transferring the lines and color, leading to their no longer needing to be hand inking. However, the line art created would fade over time, meaning that most of the animation was done in xerography for the Black Cauldron. David W. Spencer would win a Technical Academy Award for his creation, but a way of using a computer for this would render this technique obsolete. So that will be in the future. I might have talked about that in my Secret of NIMH video. I can't remember. This is the first film to incorporate CGI. It was used for bubbles, a boat, a floating orb, and the cauldron itself, actually. Although productions for The Black Cauldron and The Great Mouse Detective were happening at the same time, The Great Mouse Detective CGI was done first. When Joe Hale heard about this, he got excited at the idea and had some of the team working on the CGI for The Great Mouse Detective create some elements for The Black Cauldron. I can't wait to tell you in my Great Mouse Detective video what the CGI was used for and what scene it was used for. Anyway, live action footage of dry ice was used to create steam and smoke coming out of the cauldron. This was the last animated film to be completed in the original animation building at the studio. So I guess something happened and they had to go to a different location, and then they came back to a different building at the studio. So this is the last one in the original, which is the end of an era, and it makes me sad. Guys, I'm gonna get teary-eyed over these different ends of eras. This is the first animated film. Okay, so I actually figured this out. This is the first Disney animated film to have no musical numbers in it at all. At all. So there is no musical numbers, rather just sung in the way that the characters aren't singing, and then there's some where the characters are singing. This was the first one where you don't have anything. The score was written and originally conducted by Elmer Bernstein, who used Ons Martenot. I really hope that's not French, because it looks French. An early electronic musical instrument to create the dark mood in Prédan. Due to revisions, a lot of his score was cut from the film. Some parts were re-recorded for the album release of the music by Vares Sarabande in 1984, conducting the Utah Symphony Orchestra, who were performing the soundtrack. This is the first Disney movie to receive a PG rating from the Motion Pictures Association. This is the first Disney film since Sleeping Beauty to be in Super Technirama 70 millimeter or whatever. Yeah. Possibly the first to combine the format with Dolby Stereo 70 millimeter 6-track surround sound. I can confirm that I think that is true, because I don't think Dolby Stereo sound was a thing when Sleeping Beauty came out. Especially not 6-track surround sound. While the film was originally budgeted at $25 million at the time, which is $75.9 million when adjusted for inflation, it has been said that it could have costed $44 million, which is $133 million when adjusted for inflation to make. That's crazy. Apparently it was the most expensive animated film at the time, which was also said about Fox and the Hound. So we just keep making it rain with budget and money, baby. I don't know. And The Black Cauldron made only $64.6 million when adjusted for inflation domestically. It has been called the film that almost killed Disney. And unlike most Disney animated films, this was not re-released into theaters every 7 years. And it was not even released in home video until 13 years after it was released, which, given it was released in the 80s and home video was starting to emerge and become popular, this was very uncommon. I can't state how uncommon it was. Listen, I remember the Disney era where even if it was a dud, it was given a home video release. Did not matter how it did in the box office. Home video release. This did not get a home video release until 13 years later. It's just crazy. The Black Cauldron, however, was popular internationally, particularly in France, where it was the 5th most attended film that year. And The Black Cauldron was praised by some critics for the impressive animation, fantasy elements, music, and voice acting. Other critics criticized the film, citing the weak story, unmemorable characters, and the lack of charm and emotional depth from previous Disney animated features. One critic actually compared it to The Rescuers, saying that was a much better adaptation than this one. The author of the books, Lloyd Alexander, actually had this to say about the film, quote, "First, I have to say there's no resemblance between the movie and the book. Having said that, the movie itself, purely as a movie, I found to be very enjoyable. I had fun watching it. What I would hope is that anyone who sees the movie would certainly enjoy it, but I'd also hope that they'd actually read the book. The book is quite different. It's a very powerful, very moving story, and I think people would find a lot more depth in the book." Walk-around versions of the characters made appearances at the Disney parks when The Black Cauldron was released. I don't really know if they meet anymore. I'm assuming no. Maybe special events? I could only find a picture of Taryn and Elenwee with Mickey, so I have no idea if any other characters were ever a costumed character. If I see a Gurgi costume character, I'm running the other way. I don't want to see Gurgi be like Mickey Mouse costume height. Don't give me that. Horned King, also run. He's freaky. Also running the other way. This is one of my favorite facts. In 1986, In 1986, the quick service restaurant Lancer's Inn at Walt Disney World was renamed to Gurgi's Munchings and Crunchings. And in fact, I saw like a blog post by an old Disney college program student saying that because it hadn't been released on home video, people would go in being like, "Who is Gurgi? What is this?" And he'd have to like explain the plot to him, which I find really interesting. Who is Gurgi? What is a munching and what is a crunching? In 1993, Gurgi's Munchings and Crunchings would be remodeled and replaced with Lumiere's Kitchen. It is currently the Friar's Nook. In July of 1986, the Cinderella Castle Mystery Tour opened at Tokyo Disneyland, in which the characters from the Black Cauldron appear. If you want to know more, Defunctland actually has a video on it. If you'd like me to make a video about it, I'd be willing to. I'd be fine to move on to parks history as well. But if you'd want more instant gratification, Defunctland has a video about it. Also, if you want to know a lot more about the production of The Black Cauldron than what I go into, I believe Yesterworld has a video on the production of The Black Cauldron. The cast of the film have recurring cameos in The House of Mouse. During a specific episode, Daisy uses the cauldron. The plot of the film is a major focus of the direct-to-DVD movie Once Upon a Halloween, where several scenes from The Black Cauldron are shown. And also, apparently, it's kind of in that movie's universe canonical that Snow White and The Black Cauldron take place in the same universe and same place, but at different times. In 2016, Disney reacquired the film rights to the book series in order to adapt the series into live-action films. As of today, we have had no announcements about it, so I'm assuming it's not happening. This is my fun facts section, so enjoy my fun facts. Tinkerbell has a brief cameo with the fairy folk. The Black Cauldron is the first Disney animated movie since Alice in Wonderland to have closing credits. And this would be a continued practice throughout all time. This is the only film adaptation of any of the books written by Lloyd Alexander. This was the first animated Disney film from the canon to use sound effects made for the film itself, with only a few Disney classic sound effects being used. This is the first Disney animated feature to use the 6-track Dolby Stereo surround soundtrack, and the only to use this 6-track version. So I talked about the Super Technorama film. So this is the second one, of course, following Sleeping Beauty. And this is also the last to use that technique as well. This is the first animated film to use the classic Walt Disney Pictures logo. Black Cauldron is the first full-length Disney animated feature since Snow White to have completed scenes cut. And this is the first animated movie to not end with Walt Disney Productions or the end. And that's all the facts that I have. My goodness, that's all the history, that's all the facts that I have. So stay tuned to hear my husband and I's thoughts on the Black Cauldron. So we just finished the Black Cauldron, and for our first time watching, and for the first thing that, this is the first time, I hate to say it, this is the first time I've understood why this movie isn't that popular. I understand why people love it. I can see reasons why people love it. But I also can understand why it didn't do well. There's quite a few problems. I mean, first off, we just kind of started having a conversation about it. So it's dark fantasy. And dark fantasy goes a lot into the world building. But thinking about it, it's like, I don't feel like even the motivation of the villain is very set why he wants to be doing what he's doing. There's other things like, I don't know, there's things that I feel that should have been explained, like Ellen sprite things that she has, and the harp, and, I don't know, I don't think we need to know why the pig's an oracle, but, I was gonna say Ham, but it's Henwood. I don't know. I was going to call her Ham. That's not true. I was going to call her Hamwin, but that's not true. It's Henwin. We don't need to know all these reasons. We don't particularly need to know why Taryn is with, I don't even remember the guy's name.
Oh, his, leader, parent, guardian?
The guy he's kind of like an apprentice to. I don't know.
I guess apprentice
yeah.
might be more reflective of their relationship. Yeah.
I don't think we particularly need to know that, but there's other setups that just aren't very set up. It's world built with kind of the Horned King and his backstory, but I don't feel like his motivation, is it just like a Doofenshmirtz take over the world kind of vibe? I don't know.
What I was going to say, and maybe this is maybe a way to put it into words. We were kind of talking and joking partway through the movie that this is kind of like a D&D party. But the comparison kind of stands where it feels like it's a D&D party where you guys don't take the backstory super seriously, or you have a DM that doesn't really care too much about backstory, which isn't a bad thing, because the adventure is great. The adventure is a great time. They have a fun time. And the same way with a D&D party, you can have a fantastic adventure and just never address your characters' backstories. And I kind of feel like it's kind of the same going on here. All of these things are introduced that make you kind of go, oh, I wonder why that is. I would like to learn more about that. And then it's just kind of not brushed upon again. But overall, it's good. Like I said, it's a great adventure. I think it's fun going through and seeing it happen in action. We kind of joked that if it was a D&D party, the player for Gurgi is some dude who's never played Dungeons and Dragons before, and he's only seen it from memes of what Dungeons and Dragons is, or joke builds that people always post about on the internet, that one where a person's a sentient piece of bread that moves itself with Mage Hand. I don't know if you've heard that one, my love. Very funny build. Basically, their build is that they're a piece of bread that moves itself with Mage Hand. But it feels like the player had seen all of those and was like, you know what? I'm going to make a joke build. Here's my mascot character, Gurgi.
Something we talked about, spoilers for the Black Cauldron, but obviously, when Gurgi sacrificed himself, it didn't feel justified. It didn't feel justified for them to feel sad about Gurgi's death enough to say, yeah, we're going to take Gurgi instead of the sword. Gurgi, okay, no hate, because I know there's people who love this character. Gurgi is the Bibble of this movie. But here's the thing, Bibble doesn't sacrifice himself. So the only plot relevance Gurgi has is to sacrifice himself. He does nothing else.
I mean, he kind of helps them find the pig, kind of.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's kind of like a Deus Ex Machina is how they treat it.
He's a Deus Ex Machina.
Is he just, like, shows up and goes like, look, I remember these tracks. Why don't you follow me? You know? Or he just kind of, like, shows up to solve the problem in his goofy mascot character way, and then they move on, you know?
I feel like maybe I missed it. But, like, the Horned King's motivations aren't really shown? I don't know. And then, like, I understand the rating. And I will say, I understand the stuff, like, oh, this is a little scary for littles. I will say, for me personally, as a kid, and I say this as a scaredy cat kid, I probably would have been a little bit scared of this, but not too scared to not be able to watch it. I probably would have been able to watch it, but I would have had a few nightmares about stuff like that. And then, like, the imagery, like, they go full Indiana Jones on the Horned King at the end. It's a wee bit scary, but here's my thing. I, as an adult, still kind of get scared when I watch the first Pirates movie because it looks so real and it's kind of freaky because it's in live action. Hey, don't say anything. What do you want to say?
I'm just gonna quip here. You get scared for the first and second one because you think all of the sea people are freaky too.
I don't like the sea people. They're gross and they're freaky. We recently saw both of them in theaters again because they were showing them in theaters in our local theater. I don't like, here's the thing. I love the Pirates movies. I think both of them are kind of freaky though, you know? Genuinely scared me for quite a bit of time after I watched the first one for a little bit, you know? Like, it definitely scared me. That is for sure. I don't know. I feel like this would be less scary because it's animated, but also I'm like, you know, your kid, you know, make a judgment call. I also feel like the Horned King scene is a lot less scary than, like, the Raiders of the Lost Ark scene.
Yeah.
Like,
I was gonna say it for animation content.
As a kid, they wouldn't let me watch that scene because it was too scary.
I mean, understandably so. But, like, for, like, a content comparison for people who have not seen Black Cauldron, it's kind of a little bit of the stuff that Rasputin has going on.
Yes.
In Anastasia.
Yes,
It's
100 million
very
percent.
similar
100 million percent, I'd say Rasputin, which I think, like, Rasputin is a little bit scary, but I don't think he's particularly, like, he's still an animated character at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah. There's actually a lot in common with them when you kind of sit and think, where they're both kind of necromancy-ish. Mm-hmm. I feel like what's different is the Horned King is more traditional necromancy, while, like, Rasputin is kind of more like an alternative form of necromancy, if that makes sense, rather than, like, bringing skeletons back from the dead. It's, like, death magic and the such. But, like, stylistically and how it's, like, animated and how it's depicted and, like, how they die is very, very similar.
I agree. I do fear that some of the characters are kind of I don't want to say one-dimensional because their personality can really shine in some scenes, but I don't feel like it's as much about the characters as it is about the adventure. Does that make sense?
I was to say, like I touched on earlier, it feels like there is supposed to be more we know about all of the characters other than Taran. Mm-hmm. Like, we get his very clear origins from the beginning, you know, and it's nothing complicated, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. But, like, what's her name? Ellen Wee is a princess.
We don't find out anything about that.
We don't find anything out about what that means. Like I said, it gives off the vibe of, like, you show up to a table, and the one player is like, yeah, here's my princess character, Princess Eloise. She's a level 2 mage or whatever. And they're like, great, sounds good. Do you have any, like, cool lore to share about it? No, this is my character, my OC. And it just kind of, like, doesn't get touched upon. And I'm like, it's good. It's a good story. I feel like as an adventure, it's a great adventure. But if you're wanting to dig a little bit more, you're not going to find much depth. At least that's given. And maybe that's on purpose. If you like just, like, sitting down and making up how all of that goes, that's great. This gives you a lot of, like, leads to go off of on how you could interpret the story and how you could kind of, retheme it and whatnot of, like, what means what or whatever. Maybe the harp means something, and because it's clearly magical, it's just not really brushed upon why or what it's doing or even really how it works. You just kind of figure out how it works through the course of the movie.
I don't know. I feel like all of the characters could have been expanded on a tiny bit more as to, like, they kind of just join him on his quest. Like, they come, they show up, and then they join. And I get that, but we don't know anything about who they are, and, like, we get why Ellen Weiss there. And we kind of, I don't know. It just, like, it doesn't really make sense to me because they don't explain her fairy crap. She's like, yeah, because of my lights, my magic lights. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't.
Yeah. And like, it feels like something that, like, a person who's playing the Black Cauldron tabletop system would be like, oh, yeah, the fairy lights, the famous, like, royal family fairy lights. And then everyone else at the table is like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But then me as an outsider who's not read the core rulebook has no idea what you're talking about.
And I'm sure, and this is, like, my thing, I really want to do a series where I read all of these books because I will genuinely probably tell you this movie will make so much more sense after I read the book. I'm sure there's so much that from the book that got left on the cutting room floor for this one.
I did not know this one was a book. And if so, that makes a lot of sense. Like, an immense amount of sense. Like, it feels like... It feels like reading... I don't know if you had those in your library as a kid, but when I was in high school, and I was kind of like, one of my classes, I helped with the librarian. Whole different story, whole different monkeys, whole different circus. Not going to go too in detail. But I remember this, like, magazine-style rack that was just covered in all these really old Star Wars books that were made before the prequel trilogy. They were, like, in that space between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogies when they were written. And they were meant to be sequels to the original trilogy. Mm-hmm. And they were about the weirdest, wildest fanfic level stories I had ever read. Like, I just, like, picked one up, looked at the back, and I was like, what the fetch is it? Now, granted, this is coming from me in high school, which was in the midst of the sequel trilogy being made. Mm-hmm. So, like, it's especially even weird going on here. But, like, even then, just looking at them and being like, this doesn't make a lick of sense. Where was any... It feels like if you had, like, made a movie based off of just one of those books of Star Wars and then just never touched the original trilogy. Just like you picked a random one of these fanfic books. It was just like, that's our Star Wars movie. Here you go.
Well, it's kind of like if you adapted, I can't even think of one of the Disney movies that they've adapted. And like one of the Disney the stories that they've adapted, it would be like Lady and the Tramp if they chose to focus on Lady and Tramp's adventure rather than them as characters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, or like skip the whole part with the new baby in the house and stuff and just like completely glance over all of that or whatever when they're doing the plot. Or like imagine Fox and the Hound except it just cuts to, like, right when they're heading off on the trip. And then they come back or whatever. And it just cuts to the grown-up part where they all grow up. And that's the whole plot of Fox and the Hound.
Yeah, like, we don't get anything of why Taran is there.
I mean, we get an idea why Taran is there.
I mean, we do, but it's like, I don't know. There's some things.
He's clearly there to stop the cauldron. But it feels like everyone else is just kind of their D&D party style of like, well, my thing's been done. I'm free. I got nothing else to do this Tuesday. Can I come help?
And that's the thing is, I don't think we lack media literacy to notice that, you know, like these, we can infer about these things, you know? We can infer what each of these things mean. We can infer, you know, like we know that, you know, these have some significance because we're told about them and shown them. But we have no idea why they're important. Like, we did not need to have Ellen Wee with the lights.
Well, she could have just been not a princess, and the story would not change.
Exactly. But also, the other thing is, we could have had one line of exposition about what the lights do, and that's it. You know? Like, even just, oh, they thought my lights were magic, but they're just like, they thought my lights possess some sort of magic, but they're just these little magical lights.
She does say that, but that's about all we get. Is she's like, oh yeah, the Horned King thought they were prophetic or whatever, and that's why I'm here, and I'm like, that doesn't really tell us. That
Great.
just tells us what it's not.
What are they? Because I feel like if they were anything, they would have to have some sort of plot relevance, and I feel like they were just like, I don't want to do that. We don't have time to do that, you know?
Well, I'm okay if they don't have plot relevance, but we have to understand, like,
what they are and what their limitations are.
Well,
you know?
not even just that, but, like, why do me as the audience care about Eloise having this light? Because halfway through the story, she just stops using it. Like, it just kind of goes away and never comes back. And so, like...
No, it does. You see it at the end.
Okay, well, you know, we see it at the end and stuff, but it feels like it doesn't contribute anything after their first meetup, you know?
You're right. You are 100% right. And I truly believe... And the harp, what is the harp? The harp does something when he lies or something like that.
It reacts or whatever.
But we don't get any exposition about that at all. And I don't want to say like, oh, like be like, oh, we're media illiterate, like make it seem like we're media illiterate. But I'm like, just a word of explanation would have been nice.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't even really explain what it does. It just kind of reacts to him when he lies, and it makes it really obvious. And so you kind of put it together as the audience. And I get that that's more of a comedy bit. I get that. I'm okay with that. But, like, the implication of that is that's all we get behind his story. There's nothing else. Like, I feel like there's supposed to be some more flavor on... Like, you don't just see a giant castle like that and go, herder, I'm just going to go knock on the door and sing a song for him. You know, the most ominous castle you could imagine in the dark part of the woods surrounded by thickets and thorns. Surely they'll be interested in, you know, a show when they're eating their dinner. You know, like, it feels like there's a little bit of a gap we're missing.
Also, the other thing is when you compare it to Henwin, which is what Taran has, and then which actually has plot relevance, you think that the two other magical things are gonna have plot relevance. They don't. They just exist. Which makes me think that in the book they might have plot relevance. Yeah. And so it kind of just frustrates me to be like, yes, this is probably a significant enough character trait that they felt they had to include it. But at the same time, then it poses no relevance after.
Yeah. To move on from that, though, I feel like that's its biggest issue. You know, its glaring error. That I think, if I were grading it as is, I think I'm okay with high B. I think that is a little low because I was going to give it the benefit of the doubt. I am going to say it's a very pretty movie.
It's very pretty.
It's very, very Disney, pretty backgrounds, very...
Soundtrack is gorgeous.
The soundtrack is really good. You know, there's a lot of other things that hit it right on the nail. I love the character designs. It's not very obviously communicated, but it's very clear that the main party is supposed to be relatively normal looking. Like, obviously they're a little bit exaggerated because they're cartoon characters, right? But like they're not immensely exaggerated like all of the enemy style characters are, like all the bandits and goons, and also like the skeletons, even the Dark Lord himself, and like, you know, Creeper and all the other little guys, and all the other characters of the evil side are clearly designed with extremely exaggerated figures, you know, whether being immensely overweight or being immensely scrawny or super short or super lanky. Yeah, but I was gonna say, pushing aside what M's gonna probably mention, I do think overall their design philosophy is interesting. I think it's really cool, and I think they did it pretty well. I do like how it's overly exaggerated. It kind of helps communicate to the audience, hey, you know, these witch people who are not as exaggerated but are still pretty exaggerated are clearly trying to be communicated at that they're being two-faced. You know, it's not going to be like the three fairies from Sleeping Beauty. This is, you know, more like the three fates from Hercules, you know. They're clearly meant to be communicated.
When I saw them was the three fates from Hercules.
We need to talk about something. I thought that racist Disney was over and that we'd move on to kind of slightly racially insensitive Disney. There is a scene in this movie that depicts a caricature of a Romani woman. And it's crazy that this studio will later go on to create Esmeralda.
You've become the very thing you've swore to destroy.
Maybe it's a you live and you learn situation. Maybe, you know. There is a scene that if you have littles or just littles, I would skip. It's with the witches. It's a little 80s PG moment. The rest of this, I'd say, is fine, especially, like, if your kid's okay with, like, the darker stuff, you know? Yeah. If you have a kid that already watches, like, Dark Crystal and Secret of Nim and stuff like that, they'll be fine.
Yeah. But you'll know it when you see the frogs.
You'll know it when you see the frogs. That's all I have to say is I would watch that scene beforehand on your own and decide where you would like to skip.
And, you know, like how mature your kids are and whatnot.
It made me uncomfortable as an adult. That's all I'll say. I am a fully grown adult, and it made me uncomfortable. And it's very interesting because I wouldn't expect Disney to do anything like that at this time. I don't know. I don't think Walt would have loved anything like that. And I know people hate it when people bring up Walt to talk about different eras, but I'm like, I genuinely don't think Walt would have allowed something like that in his movie. But viewer discretion advised. That's all I'll say. Continuing on, Gurgi looks like Mark Hamill. I'll be taking no arguments. He looks like Mark Hamill. He doesn't sound like Mark Hamill, but he looks like Mark Hamill, and that's the only thing I'll be saying.
I also noticed something funny that's going to ruin your guys' opinions of the character designs. Gurgi and Taran have the exact same haircut.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that in the last 5 minutes of the film. I was like, you know, they kind of have the same haircut.
Mm-hmm. I also love Munchins and Crunchins. I will say he does the trope of saying the funny line after coming back to life
Or Playing Dead.
Or Playing Dead or whatever. That's not a trope yet, so I'll forgive it. Tick off the sin counter. Actually thinking about it, and this is actually because of the stuff that's in our B tier, I would put it mid B tier and not high B tier. You got to consider our B tiers like Bambi and Pinocchio.
Yeah.
And
I'd say it's about equal Pinocchio.
the problem is it's so gorgeous.
It is
but
a very, very pretty movie, and like I talked about, there's a lot of good in it. The adventure is really good. It's a really good adventure. If you like kind of that action, fantasy adventure, it's really good. It also has a lot of really good character designs. The soundtrack is amazing. If you love that type of stuff and you love dark fantasy, I think they handled the world pretty well. Even if it's not very well, communicated to the audience, you still are given a lot of space to kind of ponder and think about the world, like you do in a lot of other a lot of other dark fantasies. And I think it does that really, really well. Just the parts that it flops on, it really flops on.
yeah, that's my only problem is like it is good, and the problem is its good moments are so great, but its bad moments are real, not like there's any real bad moments, but I feel like because some moments are so great, its flaws are so glaringly obvious when it's there. Does that make sense? Oh, the Black Cauldron. Is there anything else to really say? I think the other thing that's a departure is there's not even a single song in this movie, which is, I think, a big departure with Disney because they're used to having songs in their films.
Okay, that was one other minor critique I did have. They have a bard in their adventuring party. He almost sings at his introduction, but then gets interrupted and never sings the whole story. He doesn't try to sing. He does the kind of charismatic of, we're talking and I'm trying to be the intermediary, and he also does the like
him. Can I be honest? He's kind of annoying in some moments.
I liked him. I think overall he's a good character. I did like him. He is very like stereotypical bard, not like the cringy, constantly horny type of bard, but like the fun, like historical stereotypical one where he's very charismatic. They'd be writing poetry. They're very diplomatic and that type of style character. He is very on the nose for that of like, even just like the ending part, he's like berating the witches and being like, hey, no, we're not just going to give this up. I know, I remember all of this. I am going to demand that you guys, bargain with us and whatever. So I think he was overall a good character, but I do think that's one drawback. He does not sing the whole plot, the entire plot. It's so sad.
I don't even think he really tries to play his harp at all either, so I'm like...
I think he goes to reach for it once and then doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like... There are just moments where I feel like there could be more, but there isn't. And so I think for that reason, it doesn't go into C because I don't think it's that bad. I don't see that many glaring issues with it. I really do like it. I just can't, A is my favorites. I really love it. But there's one issue I have with this. There's enough issues that I have to put it in B.
Yeah, I was going to agree with that. I was going to say, I really love Black Cauldron. I think it was really good. I think overall they did a great job. It's not a bad movie, but its glaring issues are glaringly obvious, and they are easy to spot, and they kind of pull you away from the plot a little bit because of it. But overall, it's a good movie.
In my opinion, if there's any scene that can take you out of the plot a little bit, it should be in B.
if there's anything that takes you out of the plot.
What I was gonna say is, like, I think with the case of Black Cauldron is it has a lot of really good goods, but a lot of low lows. Mm-hmm. And I think that is kind of what puts it in B tier.
I think I already said that.
Yeah, is overall it is B tier quality, you know, with the highs and lows accounted for.
And I will say it might be above Pinocchio. Whoa, 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 whoa.
But maybe not that much above Pinocchio.
I'd say,
Like, I'd be okay even the slot right above.
I wouldn't mind if it was, I'd have to look at my B tier. I would definitely put it below Bambi. I'd say that the Black Cauldron has the opposite problem than the other ones in the B tier. It's like, and some in the A tier at some points, is it moves too fast. I feel that at some points it moves too fast rather than moving too slow. Does that make sense? Like it just feels like by the end of the movie, like by the time like the Horned King gets defeated, you're like, huh?
Yeah.
Like this is already happening? It feels like we should have half an hour left of this movie, and we don't.
Not only is, this is already happening, but, the boss is over already?
Yeah.
You know, like, peace and love, that is also a fair point. The like, battle, which is being generous, with the Horned King, isn't really much to write home about.
Which is crazy, because this is like one of the most crazy Disney villains ever.
Exactly. He is insane.
He has an undead army.
Like, he has a really cool design, cool home base, fantastic army, really cool abilities, and he just kind of, like, gives up, more or less. He kind of just gives up, kind of.
He's like, Gurgi.
I was like,
Gurgi jumps in, he's like, whee! And then he's like, oh, fetch. And then it's done.
Yep, and then he comes over. It you know what? It doesn't even show why, because he throws Taran, right? He's like, you're gonna go in the cauldron first. And then Taran just kind of like lays dead, I guess, lays down. Mm-hmm. And then he gets scooped up by the cauldron anyways. Like, that just kind of happens. You know?
Like, well, the problem with me is I'm like, why did it take so long for him to get scooped up by the cauldron? Like, it didn't show the souls going back in too much. It showed him a little bit after Gurgi died. But then you had all that exposition in the scene with the Horned King and Taran. And then he goes in and gets scooped up. And I'm like, it would have been so much cooler if you'd actively seen more souls go in.
I think if I was to rewrite that final scene, I think it would be really cool if, rather than him sending off the army and they're all off screen and whatever, have it be like the party is up high, like they already are, and so it's hard to see them properly. Gurgi comes, unties them, and rather than being in like a dungeon room of sorts where they're having the cauldron, have it like at the throne room. You know, the big one where he has the big, huge chair and stuff. Have it right there.
Be fair, I think that is the throne room. It's just a different,
maybe a different angle.
Throne room. Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't feel like it was very well communicated. If it is, but like have it like be really obvious that this is the heart of the castle, and this is the closest to the Dark Lord you can get, and have him like, you know, because he's clearly a mildly theatric kind of guy, where he's mildly, of course, but he's like, I'm going to show you all my, you know, cool creation. You get to witness it like he already does, and, you know, puts the skeleton in the pot. And then all of the skeletons start rising in the room or something, and kind of have that moment where they are there and they are surrounded. The party is surrounded, so that when Gurgi comes, everyone isn't just like standing there going, no, Taran, don't jump. And Gurgi goes, don't jump, I'll jump. And then he does. I feel like it would add more tension to like, they are being circled in. The skeletons are coming from every single angle. They are desperate. And Taran goes to jump in, and then Gurgi has his moment where he's like, no, you have lots of friends, I have none, so it's okay if I get sacrificed or whatever, and jumps in. I feel like that would give that scene more emotional meaning, and then you can kind of also see the Dark Lord have his plans fall in front of him. And maybe then at that point, the cauldron spills open, all of the air starts pulling them in. Maybe you can kind of do, again, kind of pulling some of the idea from Indiana Jones, all of the like skeleton souls rip out of their bodies and go back into the cauldron, and the Dark Lord is pulled with them or something. If I was just rewriting that scene, that'd maybe be how I would change it.
I would still have the scene with Taran and the Horned King, but I would still like to be actively, I feel like we're shown, but, I feel like if it was active chaos still going on around them, it would be so much more tension building than what we actually got.
It kind of feels like the skeletons don't do anything. You see them marching out, and then they all die, obviously, because the cauldron gets destroyed, or the powers of it get stopped, or whatever.
Yeah, and that's kind of my problem. I don't know. I feel like there's just... It feels like they had a longer sequence for that, but due to time and budget, they probably had to cut it. That's mine.
Did you want to know that?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
That's why I had it on the bed.
Okay, but it seems like you had the longer sequence.
Yeah, they had a longer sequence planned, but it didn't pan out.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like I said, it has some holes, but it is overall a good movie.
I think it's a good movie, and I think if you can just, I don't know, I feel like if you watch it, you'll enjoy it because you're not critiquing it the way we are.
What she's saying is, it's okay if you like it. We have some glaring errors, but we also have some things that we think the movie is really good. There's a lot of good that the movie does. And so if you are able to accept those problems, or heck, maybe you've read the book and those problems just kind of slide off you because you understand the context, then it's a good movie. If you like it, then by all means enjoy your movie. It's a good movie overall. It's not garbage. It's not, mind-numbingly terrible. You don't have to shut your brain off to enjoy the world or to enjoy the characters. But just know that there are a few errors that are pretty obvious to see.
Just, some minor things in, development. But if that doesn't matter to you, that's okay. For me personally, I prefer much more character-driven stories.
Yeah.
And I like some context, even if that's a show not tell.
Or even if it's just a throwaway sentence sometimes, I'm okay with that.
That's okay. That makes sense to me. That's fine.
I understand the harp isn't important to the plot, ultimately. But even just I picked up this old stupid harp and it's the only one I've learned to play or whatever.
And it's got something with it, but I can't figure out what it is, you know.
Or even just some throwaway line like that. That's fine.
That's
all
fine.
I need.
I don't know. It's just something that alludes to the harp being magic. I don't know.
I don't know. Just as an example, but yeah.
But I don't know. To me, I'm okay without it. For me personally, and this is just my taste, I prefer more character-driven stories.
It does a lot of showing without a lot of telling.
Well, no, not even that, because I can normally deduce from showing.
Well, what I mean by that is, they show these things, they show they're important, but then the audience is just left shaking their head because they have no idea why. A show don't tell
feel
kind of implies that what you're showing is communicating something.
But then it's not even communicated why it's important when it's shown. So not even it's not even said. It doesn't have to be said with your audience why something you're
we don't need a stat screen. I don't know if anyone's seen The Kids Next Door, but every time they bring a cool new invention, they like pause the show and they do like a little like stat screen where all these things appear and whatever. Like we don't need that, you know. We don't need like a full
even
breakdown.
just like
but you know,
showing us why this thing is important makes sense. Like Terran's sword, we understand why that's important. That makes sense. That's done really well. Almost nothing else in the movie is done.
And I actually think the sword's a good example. Like these writers, so he pulls it from the king, right? Or at least presumingly the king. I guess they don't really know, but presumingly the king. And they talk about it, how it's the mark of a great warrior. And so it kind of helps us understand as the audience that this is kind of symbolic for his path to be a warrior. And that is kind of communicated, and that's why losing the sword is so important, and that's why giving up the sword later in the movie is even more important. And I feel like that's kind of different with some of the other objects and items of the plot.
Again, Ellen Wee has those lights around her, never explained what they are and why they're there. And that makes me, like, the harp, it's fine. But I can get over it. But the lights genuinely anger me.
Yeah. Like, I know we are kind of repeating ourselves a lot, but again, even a throwaway line that's like, oh, this is a cool magic that my family has developed, the royal family has been using for generations for festivals and stuff, but people mistake it to think it's some sort of prophetic thing. They're just lights or something like that, you know?
Yeah, or even, oh, I found a spell book and I have these lights now.
Or I read a spell out loud and this thing stuck with me.
Yeah.
Like you could also have that with the bard or something. Of like, I read a spell out loud and now this harp has to stay with me.
Yeah, I don't know.
I hope you all have a wonderful day and know that it's totally okay to like something, even if we disagree or even if I don't value it as much as you do or M values it as much as you do. It's still okay to like them.
I'm not saying that it's bad to like this. I'm just saying that, like, there are, like, if you look at it objectively, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, just because a movie's not perfect does not mean that you...
Doesn't mean it's bad.
Like, I think the best thing about cinema is that just because people love Twilight movies.
Oh.
People love the Twilight movies. And, see, you went, oh.
Yeah.
But, like, people are well aware that it is just a so bad it's good moment.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can just treasure something from your childhood and that's okay. So, anyway, we hope you're doing well. We hope you're safe and we hope you're out adventuring the best you can.
Bye-bye. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Bye.